Pookie believes in Santa Claus. My favourite book, and I know yours too. Only 2 more days till Christmas, said Pookie happily. I wonder what Santa Claus will bring us this year, Belinda. Pookie, the little white rabbit with wings, and Belinda, the woodcutter's daughter, were sitting by a rosy log fire having their tea. I would like a beautiful pink party dress, Pookie, wished Belinda. But that's silly of me, because I never go to parties. I expect he will bring me some strong shoes like last year, and the year before that. But Belinda, began Pookie, and then he stopped. A very worried frown settled on his small, white, furry brow. Belinda, began Pookie. Belinda, I mean... What is it, Pookie? Asked Belinda, passing him an iced honey bun. Nothing, murmured Pookie. Nothing at all. For how could he tell Belinda that he knew Santa Claus had not bought her the strong shoes? He, Pookie, had seen her daddy put them beside her bed while she slept. But before he could talk it over with her, there was a knock on the door, and in trooped a crowd of happy, chattering little woodland folk, each carrying a tiny plum pudding and a cup. For it was Plum Pudding Eve, and a great event in the wood. The woodland folk gathered in little groups around their fires, boiling their puddings, and Pookie's special friends bring theirs to the woodland cutter's cottage. Until nearly midnight, they all sit cosily around the warm hearth, sipping honey tea and nibbling gingerbread, whilst the delicious, spicy-smelling puddings boil merrily in Belinda's big cauldron. Everyone tells fearsome, ghouly, ghosty stories, and when at last the puddings are ready and wrapped in fresh, snowy cloths, away home go the woodland folk through the quiet, snow-laden wood, ready to giggle and jump at their silly little shadows. When the cottage door closed behind the last rabbit, Pookie and Belinda tidied up the hearth and got ready for bed. Would you like some bread and milk, Pookie? Asked Belinda, putting the big cauldron away. No, thank you, I'm not hungry, replied Pookie in a very small voice. For now all the laughing and chattering woodland folk had gone, he felt dreadfully worried again, and the strange, sad little fear that had bothered him for some weeks had grown so big and frightening that his blue eyes were wide with it. Why, Pookie, whatever's wrong? Cried Belinda anxiously, cuddling him close. Pookie swallowed hard. I must ask you a question, he said at last, twisting his furry paws nervously. Belinda, do you think, is there? What I really mean is, do you believe in Santa Claus? Why, Pookie, Belinda laughed with relief. Is that all that's worrying you? Why, of course I believe in Santa Claus. At least I think I do. Yes, I'm sure I do, she added hastily, seeing the fear still in Pookie's eyes at the doubt in her voice. Then that's all right then, said Pookie brightly, and he tried to cover up the fear with a brave smile. But inside, deep in his little rabbit heart, he felt more sad than ever. For now he knew even Belinda was not sure that there was really a Santa Claus. All that day and the next, Pookie watched the Christmas preparations in the wood with anxious eyes. Everywhere he went, the woodland folk were busy. Rabbits and squirrels and moles and hedgehogs and elves and gnomes and everyone else were bustling from burrow to burrow and tree to tree, with boxes of fruits and nuts for the feasting and baskets of cakes and pies and puddings and all manner of delicious things. Everyone seemed to be trying to smuggle mysterious lumpy parcels home without anyone else seeing them. And there was a tremendous lot of chatter, such as, you mustn't tell Squiffy-tail, but I've got him. And don't tell any of the diddly dormice, but I've got them a big. Silently, unhappy, Pookie moved among them, listening. Every now and again one of his friends would say, Hello, Pookie, what is Santa Claus bringing you this Christmas? I don't know, replied Pookie. And of some of the woodland folk he asked, Please tell me, do you believe in Santa Claus? Of course we do, they replied cheerily. At least, well, perhaps there isn't a real one, but, well, everyone talks about Santa Claus, don't they? But is there one? A real Santa Claus? Begged Pookie earnestly. There must be one somewhere, don't you think? And then the woodland folk looked awkwardly away and said comfortably, Of course there is, Pookie. Don't you worry. He'll bring you something nice. But Pookie did worry. He worried so much that he couldn't eat or sleep. Is it all just a game of pretend, he asked himself for the 227th time? Is there a real Santa Claus? He asked himself for the 315th time. Now the day after Puddin' Eve is tree trimming day in the wood. Everyone has a little tree. Belinda has a big one. And everyone's friends call and hang an ornament on everyone else's tree. So Pookie set out with his basket of tiny gold bells and called first on Nominee in his toadstool house. Come in, Pookie, called the elf. Wigglenose and Squiffytail are both here. I'm just boiling a few late puddings. Nominee, do you believe in Santa Claus? Asked Pookie, going straight to the point. Yes, answered Nominee firmly, looking smart in his red winter suit. He brings me lovely presents each Christmas. How do you know it's Santa Claus? Who brings them? Persisted Pookie, hanging a bell on Nominee's little tree. Well, it's supposed to be. Nominee lifted out a pudding. Last year he brought me a beautiful heather cushion and a fine new purple silk tunic, and honey, and blackberry jelly, and some leaf hankies, and... But you know Belinda made you the new purple tunic. Nominee, replied Pookie. You know Squiffytail gave you the leaf hankies. You know I made the heather cushion for you. You know Uli gave you the honey, and the jelly was from Wigglenose. Yes, I know, admitted Nominee, looking puzzled. I'm sure I was very grateful to you all. Most kind, I thought. Then why say Santa Claus brought them? Demanded Pookie. I know you gave me a dear little wooden bird you carved yourself. I know Belinda made my new red trousers. I'd seen her hide them when she heard me coming. I know who gave me all my presents. So you see, Pookie said miserably, it's just pretend. There is no such person as Santa Claus. The 5 little friends sat silently in their tree trimming forgotten. Their only sound was the crackling of fir cones on the fire. There must be, began Wigglenose. There isn't, said Pookie. Time went by. I'll make some honey tea, decided Nominee at last. Perhaps it will cheer us up. All the fun seems to have gone out of everything. All this time, Wise Elf had not said a word. Now he looked round at his friends. I feel I should apologize, he began. I'm supposed to be a wise elf, but honestly, I do not know whether there is a Santa Claus or not. I just hope there is. It's all right, Wise Elf, comforted the others. You can't be expected to know everything. It's so muddlesome, admitted Wise Elf. We know there is such an animal as a lion because lots of people have seen one, but no one seems to have really, truly seen Santa Claus. It's always someone dressed up as Santa Claus. What worries me, frowned Squiffytail, is how could Santa Claus possibly go to more than a few homes in one evening? Everyone everywhere thinks he will go to them. Oh well, sighed Pookie. It's all very confusing. Thank you for my nice tea, Nominee. Thank you for the lovely gold bell for my tree, replied the elf. See you tonight at the great thank you. And the little friends parted. Now the great thank you is a most wonderful thing to see, and very, very few humans have seen it. Yet it takes place in every wood every Christmas Eve at 1 minute to midnight. Early in the evening, all the woodland folk hang their stockings up. Then they come out of the burrows and homes and nests and stand about in excited little groups among the snowflakes, chattering and squeaking and greeting one another. Everyone carries a lighted lantern and a little basket of good things, nuts, sugared fruits, goblin sweets, home-baked honey cakes, spicy gingerbread and such like. And everyone invites everyone else to take something and then take something delicious in return from their basket. This goes on until the moon is high and the snowflakes sky, and until every basket is empty and every tummy is full. Then suddenly a great hush comes over the wood. Not a squeak or a rustle breaks the stillness. Not a whisper or a wing stirs. It is 1 minute till midnight. And every little animal, bird, and woodland creature pauses in its merrymaking, turns its face up to the great star-filled sky, and quietly smiles its thank you. For the joy of living, for a whole minute, all down to the tiniest field mice think of all the beauty and shelter and the great trees towering above them, and the wonder of the sun, moon, winds, rain, and snow. Then through the stillness rings the cry of a lone night bird. The great thank you is over, and it's Christmas Day. A happy little sigh, like a gentle puff of wind through the branches, rises from every little animal throat. The upturned gaze of the woodland folk drops from the star-filled sky back down to earth. And then every head turns eagerly towards its neighbour. Happy Christmas! Happy Christmas! Echoes everywhere, and all the woodland folk run happily round, shaking hands and paws and patting each other on the back. The moonlight sparkles on the forest frosted trees and lights up the ruby reds, yellows, emerald greens, and purples of 100 elves' winter suits, and twinkles on 100 rabbits and squirrels and moles' furry coats and whiskers. But soon the woodland folk begin to feel sleepy. One after the other they yawn, smile happily at their friends, and disappear into their cozy homes. Now and again, during the next half hour or so, a rabbit here or a squirrel there, or a hedgehog or an elf somewhere else, hurries along with a parcel, drops it on a friend's doorstep, and scurries off again. Soon all is quiet, and the wood sleeps. But on this particular Christmas night, Pookie did not sleep. Alone under the stars and snowflakes, he kept watch. If Santa Claus comes at all, I mean to see him, decided Pookie, tightening his muffler. An hour went by, but the wood remained still as still. After all, thought Pookie, rubbing his frozen paws, when you think of the size of the world, this wood is so small. He may never come here, anywhere near it. He wouldn't even know it's here. Another hour went by, and another. Then suddenly, Pookie pricked up his ears. Faintly in the distance he heard the tinkle of sleigh bells. Nearer and nearer it came, until Pookie could hear other sounds. The drumming of hooves on thick snow and the thundering rush of a heavily laden sled. Far too excited to move or even breathe, Pookie watched wide-eyed as the great scarlet and gold sled drawn by 8 prancing and galloping reindeer dashed past. And riding on the great sled, muffled in his huge scarlet cloak and mounds of fur rugs, was Santa Claus himself. Next second he was gone. I've seen him, squeaked Pookie. I must tell the others, he's really real. And he flew off and banged on Wigglenose's door. But alas for Pookie, snow was falling heavily, and when he took Wigglenose back to show him the hoof marks, they'd all disappeared. Snorted Wigglenose angrily. Very, very funny, I must say. Big joke, lots of laughter. You dreamt it, Pookie, and grumbled off down the glade. Pookie flew after him. But Wigglenose, I did see Santa Claus, he insisted. I saw his sleigh and his reindeer and everything. By now, several angry woodland folk had popped their heads out to see what all the noise was about. Pookie says he saw Santa Claus, explained Wigglenose. I did, insisted Pookie. You dreamt it, Pookie, snapped Wigglenose. You ate far too many of Squiffytail's hot nut pies at the feasting. A fine thing, fetching a rabbit out of his bed like this. A bad chill, that's what I'll get, I expect. And he muttered away into his burrow and slammed the door. But I did see Santa Claus. He is real. I didn't dream it, Pookie told himself. And then far away, he heard sleigh bells again. But this time they were not tinkling merry. With whiskers twitching with excitement, Pookie watched and to his amazement saw Santa Claus pull up the reins of the great sleigh and come to a standstill amid the swirling snowflakes right underneath the bough on which he sat. When kind little Pookie saw the sad look on Santa Claus's face and the hurt droop of the reindeer's proud heads, he forgot all about everything except wanting to help. So he flew straight down and landed on a great crumpled fold of red cloak and asked Santa what was wrong. Why, little rabbit, you startled me, gasped Santa Claus in his deep, gentle voice. Wrong? Such a lot is wrong, little rabbit, that I can't put it right again, I'm afraid. My name is Pookie, explained Pookie. I'm finished, Pookie, said Santa Claus. No one believes in me any more. He told Pookie he couldn't find one single child who believed in Santa Claus. Not a single note pinned on a mantelpiece anywhere. In fact, very few children had fireplaces in their bedrooms nowadays, just electric radiators if they were poorly, so there were no chimneys to drop the presents down either. I would have left my presents on their front doorsteps, Pookie, but the snow would cover them before the morning, and they might not be discovered for weeks. Santa Claus sighed deeply, and all his reindeer stood like statues, their breath making little clouds in the frosty air. Last year I realized there were very few children who believed in me, Pookie, the old man went on in his sad, kind voice. But it's worse than that this year. Tonight I overheard a little boy say to his sister, "This pretending to believe in Santa Claus stuff gets more boring every year. He ought to be called Santa Nuisance." That finished me, Pookie, said poor old Santa Claus. I don't mind them not believing in me for the last few years, bless their hearts, but now I find I'm just an old nuisance. Tomorrow I shall send my reindeer back to their own country. I shall never take my sleigh out again. Pookie felt choked with unhappiness and rubbed his soft little head against the old man's hand to comfort him. Suddenly Pookie had a wonderful idea. He had to speak loudly because Santa Claus was a huge man towering above him, and Pookie was just a very small rabbit perched in a fold of the great scarlet cloak. Santa Claus, called Pookie, could I come home with you tonight and see where all the presents come from, and then I could come back to the wood and tell all my friends that I've seen what you do, and that you are Santa Claus, not just someone dressed up as Santa Claus. And then they'd all tell the children everywhere. Up you hop, Pookie, smiled Santa Claus, and hang on to my cloak tightly. I'll take you to my home in the forest with pleasure, little rabbit. And with a shake of the reins and a whistle of the leader reindeer team, Santa Claus sent the great sleigh rushing toward the wood. Faster and faster galloped the reindeer, throwing great clouds of snow up with their thundering hoofs. Faster and still faster until they came to the edge of the wood, and then on over the sleepy countryside, past snow-covered villages and woods and meadows, white and sparkling with frost, on for an hour or more, on until Pookie felt he could hang on no longer. Then slower glided the sleigh and pulled up with a slithering crunch on the hard, crunchy ground. Here we are, Pookie, cried Santa Claus, and Pookie rubbed his eyes and gazed about him in amazement, speechless and surprised. He was in a forest, not unlike his own wood at home, with great trees towering high. But here, sheltered from the snow by the dense branches above, Pookie saw the busiest sight he had ever seen in his life. By lantern light, a dozen or so queer little goblins were all hard at work amongst the giant toadstools. Pookie looked closer, and then he saw they were all making things. Some were busy carving wood, some were painting, some were sitting cross-legged like tailors, stitching away merrily. As huge Santa Claus and a very small Pookie made their way in, the goblins raised their funny little brown faces and grinned cheerily, then went intently back to their work. I expect you've heard people say they don't believe in fairies too, Pookie, chuckled Santa Claus. A goblin is kind of like a fairy. Some goblins have small wings, only they don't fly as much as fairies, of course. But they work much harder. I've met goblins before, Pookie told him. Nominee is an elf, which is more of a fairy, really. But he has a lot of goblin friends, I know. And there are gnomes in our wood, and sprites, and at least 2 pixies. You'll feel at home here then, Pookie, laughed Santa Claus. Well, here are my goblins, the finest band of helpers in the whole world. All the year they work away from morning till night, making toys for me to take out on my sleigh at Christmas. You'll see some little mice here too. Pookie, they fetch and carry for the goblins. They clean paintbrushes and thread needles and sweep up shavings and make themselves very useful. Across Pookie's nose drifted a delicious, warm, goldy brown, syrupy smell. He sniffed and Santa Claus said, "You've smelt the toffee being made." He sniffed, and Santa Claus said, Ooh. He said, come and taste it. They all went together to where a group of goblins were gathered around a funny smoking stove. One goblin was poking the glowing fire cone. One was stirring the great bubbling cauldron of boiling toffee, and another was breaking up crisp toffee with a little hammer, and two little mice were carefully packaging pieces into paper bags. Plop, the plump little toffee cook offered Pookie a piece. Munching happily, Pookie trotted around, seeing all the presents being made. One goblin was busy carving little wooden money boxes, and his friend was painting them in bright yellow and red. Boys like these, I find, said Santa Claus. Girls seem more pleased with these tiny tea sets Mimp is making. When Pookie looked, there sat Mimp at a small potter's wheel, fashioning a dear little cup from clay. As the wheel spun, the knob of wet clay between his clever little brown hands, Delp in the yellow cap paints the tea sets, and Gink in the purple cap bakes them hard in his oven. Pookie saw everything that was to be seen. He saw little gardening sets of a trowel, fork, and small watering can being hammered out of metal by a goblin with a leather apron and a big hammer, and a beautifully stitched hanky cases from gossamer silks being ironed and packed neatly in a box. All your goblins look so happy, Santa Claus, said Pookie, who had just been given a nice little rabbit-sized gardening trowel for a present. Work hard and play hard, laughed Santa. There's the recipe for happiness, Pookie. You should see them enjoying themselves when the work is finished. They cook their goblin supper and laugh and chatter and sing and dance and play games under the stars, and leapfrog over the toadstools and fly high in the sky on bats' wings. Then they curl up in their cozy rugs around the stoves under the roots of the trees and sleep. My, how soundly those goblins sleep. These are just a few of the last-minute presents, explained Santa Claus. All the games and drums and dolls and bears and cricket bats and puzzles went out earlier. There are still on the sleigh, in fact, he added. And now, come along, Pookie, I'm going to take you home, because in a few hours it will be daylight. I've decided to take my sleigh out after all and deliver the presents. I can't let the goblins down. They've all worked so hard. Back on the reindeer sleigh they climbed, and after all the excitement, Pookie slept most of the ride back to the wood. Now, Pookie, here's a surprise for you, twinkled Santa Claus. I shall come back for you tonight at moonrise, and if you will, say, have 26 of your best friends ready, I will take you all back to my home for a banquet. Pookie was too excited to keep the secret, and as soon as the great sleigh had thundered out of the wood, he flew to Wigglenose burrow and knocked on the door, although it was still not quite daylight. And Wigglenose was up and dressed. Before Pookie could puff and pant out the news that Santa Claus was real, and that he had invited him and 26 of his friends to a banquet, they were joined by Ivy L, Squiffytail, and Wise Whisker Squirrel, 3 baby rabbits and a mouse, who had all been disturbed by the sleigh bells. They all crowded round the fire, and Pookie told his story, whilst Wigglenose put the kettle on and made honey tea, and apologized magnificently to Pookie for not believing in him, and being rude about too many hot nut pies. Then they put the baby rabbits into the Wigglenose's bed and curled up in blankets round the fire to await the dawn. The mouse was too excited to settle anywhere for long. Almost before they closed their eyes, it seemed to be waking time. There were wild squeaks of delight all over the woods as presents, which had mysteriously piled up while everyone slept, were opened. Pookie flew straight out to Belinda to wish her happy Christmas, and found her speechless with joy, for beside her bed she had found the beautiful pink silk party dress of her dreams, and a scarlet velvet cloak. It's to wear at the banquet tonight, squealed Pookie, and told her all about it. Here they are sleeping around the fire. It was plum pudding time before all the presents had been opened and admired, and everyone ate and ate and ate. Then Pookie invited 25 friends to the banquet, and Belinda said, all of you must go to your homes and rest now, or you will not enjoy yourselves tonight. And away they scuttled, the happy 25. Santa Claus was true to his word, and exactly at moonrise, his sleigh thundered into the wood with all its bells ringing merrily. Pookie, Belinda in a new dress and cloak, and his chosen friends were nearly beside themselves with excitement as they clambered up on the sleigh and cuddled snugly among the rugs for the thrilling ride through the snowflake night. And on the way, Santa Claus talked to Pookie in his low, kind voice. Many, many years ago, Pookie, my great-great-great-grandfather, or was it 4 greats? Well, he was a very kind gentleman. When Christmas time came round, he liked to see everyone happy. It is too big a thing to explain to a small rabbit, but humans have the most wonderful reason in the world for remembering Christmas Day. Belinda has told me, chimed in Pookie, we woodland folk keep our great thank you on Christmas Day too. It's almost too big and wonderful for small animals' brain to understand, but we know we're alive in a beautiful world and we feel we must say thank you. Santa Claus stroked Pookie's soft fur gently. Well, Pookie, when people are joyful, they like to give thanks to people they love, to remember such happy times by. So for hundreds of years, people have given each other gifts at Christmas time. Woodland folk do it too, agreed Pookie, paying great attention. But my old ancestor found that there were many lonely people that had no one to give presents to, went on Santa Claus. And some parents were too poor to give presents to their children. So he had the idea of doing up lots of presents and taking them round secretly for people to find when they woke up on Christmas morning. The reindeer were galloping full speed now, but Pookie was far too interested to notice the world passing by as the old man went on. Now, he didn't want people to know where the presents came from, Pookie, so what do you think he did? He climbed up on the roofs and dropped them down the chimney. Pookie's eyes opened wide. They'd get all sooty and... he began, but Santa Claus shook his head. No, you see, all the good housewives of those faraway days had their homes spotless for Christmas, and they always had a huge wide chimney with steps up inside them, and little boys were sent up into the dark to sweep them. So my ancestor went down from the rooftop, and for fun he popped things in their stockings left around the living room fireplace to air, and when the family had gone off to bed. So that's why people hang stockings up, explained Pookie. When poor children and lonely people discovered bright new pennies and rosy apples and sweets and gifts in their stockings, they couldn't guess who the kind person could be. They found his name was Nicholas, so they called him St. Nicholas. That's like Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, cried Pookie excitedly. I've heard Santa Claus is called Father Christmas too. Santa Claus nodded. Same person, he said. Well, this is nearly the end of our long story, Pookie. When St. Nicholas, or Santa Claus, grew up to be too old, his son carried on for him, so as not to disappoint the lonely people and poor children. And in time, his son had his own reindeer team and a sleigh to travel easily over the snow at Christmas time. And his son carried on later. And I love taking presents to lonely people and poor children who otherwise would have no presents. Suddenly, everything was clear to Pookie. That's why people don't believe in you anymore, he gasped. Everyone has copied your big, or did you say your great, oh goodness, how many greats? Grandfather. And they dress up in a red cloak and white fur like he wore. And you know, there are so many Santa Clauses about at Christmas time that children say, oh, it's only Daddy or Uncle or the man in the toy shop. Belinda told me the children at school say that. Santa Claus nodded. That's just it, Pookie. I met 4 Santa Clauses myself last Christmas. Even Diddley Dormouse dresses up for the little Diddley Dormice, and Hippy Hedgehog does for his family, nodded Pookie. And when people and children open their presents on Christmas morning, they know who all their presents are from and thank each other. And then they say, look what Santa Claus brought me. And the joke is, I've never taken them anything yet, Pookie, because they all have plenty of friends and relations to give them presents. And now, here we are. Santa Claus pulled hard on the reins, and to a standstill glided the sleigh, and everyone tumbled off, laughing and chattering. What a magnificent banquet the goblins had prepared. They had excelled themselves in their underground kitchens, with piping hot soups and delicious roasts and luscious green peas in butter, and exquisite fairy fruits in honey, and jellies of 100 flower colours and flavours, and trifles piled with whipped cream, and honeysuckle ices, and chocolate cakes that were nearly all icing. There were elfin wines and nuts and fruits to follow, and crackers to pull. Belinda was so very happy in her pink party dress and scarlet cloak, sat at one end of the long table, sat out under the sheltering trees, and Santa Claus and Pookie at the other. The feasting and gay chattering went on and on until everyone declared he couldn't eat another tiny scrap. Then Pookie made a speech and thanked Santa Claus and all his goblins and little mice for the beautiful banquet, and everyone clapped and clapped. As soon as the banquet was over, they were all snuggled amongst the rugs on the sleigh, sleepy and happy. Santa Claus gave the order to the reindeer, and the sleigh moved smoothly forward to the homeward drive. All too soon the ride was over, and soon everyone was back in their wood thinking of Santa Claus again and saying, "Farewell, thank you." "Won't we ever see you again?" asked Pookie anxiously. "Of course you will, bless you," chuckled Santa Claus, patting Pookie's little white fluffy head. "But you said," Pookie began, you only go to lonely people, and we've all got each other." Santa Claus smiled as he climbed back onto his sleigh and picked up his reins. "I might call on anyone, anywhere, at any time any Christmas," he said. "If anyone has been poorly or done specially well at school, or been very brave or kind, I like to take them a little present as well. And if anyone is poor or lonely, they get theirs as well. Goodbye, little friends. Farewell." He tugged at the reins and the sleigh began to glide away, 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 until it was far out of sight. And later, when Belinda tucked Pookie into his basket, he said, "So Santa Claus is real." "Belinda, but I'm worried about one thing. I forgot to ask him if he had a son to be Santa Claus one day." Belinda smiled. "Don't worry, Pookie. I know he has. There was a cricket bat and a football saved under the sleigh rugs." "Then there'll always be a Santa Claus," said Pookie, and fell happily asleep. The end.